you guys so much for joining us today. This is Miss Josie from the Burley Public Library. I'm here to bring you some more chapters from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And today we will be reading chapters 9 and 10. So this is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, chapter 9, The Mock Turtle Story. "You can't think of how glad I am to see you again, you old dear thing," said the Duchess as she tucked her arm affectionately into Alice's, and they walked off together. Alice was very glad to find her in such a pleasant temper, and thought to herself that perhaps it was only the pepper that made her so savage when they met in the kitchen. "When I'm a Duchess," she thought to herself, not in a very hopeful tone though, "I won't have any pepper in my kitchen at all. Soup does very well without it. Maybe it's always pepper that makes people so hot-tempered," she went on, very much pleased at having found out a new kind of rule. "And vinegar that makes them sour, and camomile that makes them bitter, and barley sugar and such things only make children sweet-tempered. I only wish people knew that, and they wouldn't be so stingy about it, you know." She had quite forgotten the Duchess by this time, and was a little startled when she heard her voice close to her ear. "You're thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk? I can't tell you just now that what the moral of that is, but I shall remember it in a bit." "Perhaps it hasn't one," Alice ventured to remark. "Tut, tut, child," said the Duchess. "Everything's got a moral, if only you could find it." And she squeezed herself up closer to Alice's side as she spoke. Alice did not much like her keeping so close to her. First, because the Duchess was very ugly, and secondly, because she was exactly the right height to rest her chin upon Alice's shoulder. And it was an uncomfortably sharp chin. However, she did not like to be rude, so she bore it as well as she could. "The game's going on rather better now," she said, by the way of keeping up the conversation a little bit. "'Tis so," said the Duchess, "and the moral of that is, oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round." "Somebody said," Alice whispered, "that it's done by everybody minding their own business." "Ah, well, it means much the same thing," said the Duchess, digging her sharp chin into Alice's shoulder as she added, "and the moral of that is, take care of these scents, and the sounds will take care of themselves." How fond she is of finding morals in things, Alice thought to herself. "I dare say you're wondering why I put my arm around your waist," the Duchess said after a pause. "The reason is that I am doubtful about the temper of your flamingo. Shall I try the experiment?" "He might bite," Alice cautiously replied, not feeling at all anxious to have the experiment tried. "Very true," said the Duchess. "Flamingos and mustard both bite, and the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together." "Only mustard isn't a bird," Alice remarked. "Right as usual," said the Duchess. "What a clear way you have of putting things." "It's a mineral, I think," said Alice. "Of course it is," said the Duchess, who seemed ready to agree to anything that Alice said. "There's a large mustard machine near here, and the moral of that is, the more there is of mine, the less there is of yours." "Oh, I know," exclaimed Alice, who had not attended to this last remark. "It's a vegetable. It doesn't look like one, but it is." "I quite agree with you," said the Duchess. "And the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be, or, if you'd like to put it more simply, never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others, that what you were or might have been was not otherwise than what you have been would have appeared to them to be otherwise." "I think I should understand that better," Alice said very politely. But if I had it written down, but I can't quite follow it as you say it." "There's nothing to what I could say if I choose," the Duchess replied in a pleased tone. "Pray don't trouble yourself to say it any longer than that," said Alice. "Oh, don't talk about trouble," said the Duchess. "I make you a present of everything I've said as yet." "A cheap sort of present," thought Alice. "I'm glad people don't give birthday presents like that." But she did not venture to say that out loud. "Thinking again?" the Duchess asked, within another dig of her sharp little chin. "I've a right to think," said Alice sharply, for she was beginning to feel a little worried. "Just about as much right," said the Duchess, "as pigs have to fly, But here, to Alice's great surprise, the Duchess' voice died away, even in the middle of her favorite word, moral. And the arm that was linked to hers began to tremble. Alice looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of them, their arms folded and frowning like a thunderstorm. A fine day, Your Majesty, the Duchess began in a low, weak voice. Now I give you fair warning, shouted the Queen, stamping her foot on the ground. Either you or your head must be off, and that in about a half time, no time. Take your choice. The Duchess took her choice and was gone in a moment. Let's go on with the game, the Queen said to Alice, and Alice was too much frightened to say the word, but slowly followed her back to the croquet ground. The other guests had taken advantage of the Queen's absence and were resting in the shade. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game, and the Queen merely remarked that a moment's delay would cost them their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarreling with the other players and shouted, "Off with his head!" or "Off with her head!" Those whom she had sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers, who of course had to leave off being arches to do so that by the end of half an hour or so, there were no arches left, and all the players, except the King and the Queen and Alice, were in custody and under the sentence of execution. The Griffin. The Queen left off, quite out of breath, and said to Alice, "Have you seen the Mock Turtle yet?" "No," said Alice. "I don't even know what a Mock Turtle is." "It's the same thing Mock Turtle soup is made from," said the Queen. "I never saw one or heard of one," said Alice. "Come on then," said the Queen, "and he shall tell you his story." And they walked off together. Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned. Come, that's a good thing." She said to herself, for she felt quite unhappy at the number of executions the Queen had ordered. Very soon they came upon a griffin, lying fast asleep in the sun. If you don't know what a griffin is, look at the picture. "Up, lazy thing," said the Queen, "and take this young lady to see the Mock Turtle and hear his story. I must go back and see after some executions I've ordered." And she walked off, leaving Alice alone with the griffin. Alice did not quite like the look of the creature, but on the whole, she thought it to be a quite safe place to stay, with it to go after, as it is to go after the savage Queen. So she waited. The griffin sat up and rubbed its eyes and watched the Queen till she was out of sight. Then it chuckled. "What fun," said the griffin, half to itself and half to Alice. "Why, what is the fun?" said Alice. "Why, she," said the griffin. "It's all her fancy, that. They never execute nobody, you know. Come on." "Everybody says come on here," thought Alice as she went slowly after it. "I never was so ordered about in all my life. Never." They had not gone far before they saw the Mock Turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely on the ledge of a rock. And as they came near, Alice could hear him sighing as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply. "What is his sorrow?" she asked the griffin, and the griffin answered very nearly all the same words as before. "It's all his fancy, that. He hasn't got no sorrow, you know. Come on." So they went up to the Mock Turtle, who looked at them with large eyes full of tears, but said nothing. "This here young lady," said the griffin, "she wants to know your history, she do." "I'll tell it to her," said the Mock Turtle in a deep, hollow tone. "Sit down, both of you, and don't speak a word till I've finished." So they sat down, and nobody spoke for some minutes. Alice thought to herself, "I don't see how he can ever finish if he doesn't begin." But she waited patiently. "Once," said the Mock Turtle at last in a deep sigh, "I was a real turtle." These words were followed by a very long silence, broken only by an occasional exclamation of from the griffin and the constant heavy sobbing from the Mock Turtle. Alice was very nearly getting up and saying, "Thank you, sir, for your interesting story," but she could not help but thinking there must be more to come, so she sat and said nothing. "When we were little," said the Mock Turtle, as he went on at last more calmly, though still sobbing a little now and then, "we went to school in the sea, and the master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise. Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one? Asked Alice. We called him Tortoise because he taught us, said the Mock Turtle angrily. Really, you are very dull. You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such a simple question, added the Gryphon. And then they both sat in silence and looked at poor Alice, who felt ready to sink into the earth. At last the Gryphon said to the Mock Turtle, Drive on, old fellow. Don't be all day about it. And he went on in these words. Yes, we went to school in the sea, though you mayn't believe it. I never said I didn't, interrupted Alice. You did. Hold your tongue, added the Gryphon, before Alice could speak again. The Mock Turtle went on. We had the very best of educations, in fact. We went to school every day. I've been to a day school too, said Alice. You needn't be so proud as all that. With extras, asked the Mock Turtle a little anxiously. Yes, said Alice. We learned French and music. And washing, said the Mock Turtle. Certainly not, said Alice indignantly. Ah, then yours wasn't a really good school, said the Mock Turtle in a tone of great relief. Now at Oz, they had, at the end of the bill, French music and washing, extra. You couldn't have wanted it much, said Alice, living at the bottom of the sea. I couldn't afford to learn it, said the Mock Turtle with a sigh. I only took on the regular course. What was that? Inquired Alice. Reading and writing, of course, to begin with, the Mock Turtle replied, and then the different branches of arithmetic, ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision. I've never heard of uglification, Alice ventured to say. What is that? The Gryphon lifted up on its paws in surprise. Never heard of uglifying? It exclaimed. You know what it is to beautify it is, I suppose. Yes, Alice said doubtfully. It seems to make things prettier. Well then, the Gryphon went on, if you don't know what it is to uglify, you are a simpleton. Alice did not feel encouraged to ask any more questions about it, so she turned to the Mock Turtle and said, What else had you to learn? Well, there was a mystery, the Mock Turtle replied, counting off the subjects on his flappers. Mystery, ancient and modern, with seaography, then drawing, and the drawing master was an old codger eel that used to come out once a week. He taught us drawing, stretching, and fainting in coils. What was that like? Said Alice. Well, I can't show it to you myself, the Mock Turtle. I'm too stiff, and the Gryphon never learnt it. Hadn't time, said the Gryphon. I went to the classical master, though. He was an old crab, he was. I never went to him, said the Mock Turtle with a sigh. He taught laughing and grief, they used to say. So he did, said the Gryphon, sighing on his turn, and both creatures hid their faces in their paws. How many hours a day did you do lessons? Said Alice in a hurry to change the subject. 10 hours the first day, said the Mock Turtle. 9 the next, and so on. What a curious plan, exclaimed Alice. That's the reason they're called lessons, the Gryphon remarked, because they lesson from day to day. This was quite a new idea to Alice, and she thought it over a little before she made her next remark. When the 11th day must have been a holiday. Of course it was, said the Mock Turtle. How did you manage on the 12th? Alice went on eagerly. That's enough about lessons, the Gryphon interrupted in a very decided tone. Tell her something about the games now. Here we are at chapter 10, the lobster quadrille. The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and drew back one flapper across his eye. He looked at Alice and tried to speak, but for a minute or two, sobs choked his voice. Same as if he had a bone in his throat, said the Gryphon, and it set to work shaking him and punching him in the back. At last the Mock Turtle recovered his voice, and with tears running down his cheeks, he went on. You may have not lived much under the sea. I haven't, said Alice, and perhaps you had never been introduced to a lobster. Alice began to say, I once tasted, but checked herself hastily and said, No, never. So you have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is. No, indeed, said Alice. What sort of dance is it? Why, said the Gryphon, first you form into a line along the seashore. 2 lines, cried the Mock Turtle. Seals, turtles, salmon, and so on. Then, when you've cleared all the jellyfish out of the way, that generally takes some time, interrupted the Gryphon, you advance twice. Each with a lobster as a partner, cried the Gryphon. Of course, the Mock Turtle said. Advance twice, set to partners. Change lobsters and retire in the same order, continued the Gryphon. Then you know, the Mock Turtle went on, you throw the lobsters shouted the Griffin with a bound in the air. As far out in the sea as you can. Swim after them, screamed the Griffin. Turn a somersault into the sea, cried the Mock Turtle, capering about wildly. Change lobsters again, yelled the Griffin at the top of his voice. Back to the line again, and then that's all the first figure, said the Mock Turtle, suddenly dropping his voice. And the two creatures, who had been jumping about like mad things all this time, sat down again very sadly and quietly and looked at Alice. It must be a very pretty dance, said Alice timidly. Would you like to see a little of it? Said the Mock Turtle. Very much indeed. Come, let's try the first figure, said the Mock Turtle to the Griffin. We can do it without the lobsters, you know. Which shall sing? Oh, you sing, said the Griffin. I've forgotten the words. So they began solemnly dancing round and round. Alice, every now and then, treading on her toes when they passed too close, and waving their forepaws to the mark of the time, while the Mock Turtle sang this very slowly and sadly. Will you walk a little faster, said the whiting to the snail. There's a porpoise close behind us, and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They're waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, won't you join the dance? You can hardly have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied, too far, and gave a look askance. He said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not join the dance. What matters is how far we go, his scaly friend replied. The further from England, the nearer is to France. There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. Then turn not pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. Will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Thank you. It's a very interesting dance to watch, said Alice, feeling very glad that it is last over. And I do so like the curious song about the whiting. Oh, as to the whiting, said the Mock Turtle, you've seen them, of course. Yes, said Alice. I've seen them at Din. She checked herself hastily. I do not know where Din may be, said the Mock Turtle, but if you've seen them so often, of course, you know what they're like. I believe so, Alice replied thoughtfully. Have their tails in their mouths, and they're all over with crumbs. You're wrong about the crumbs, said Mock Turtle. Crumbs would all wash off in the sea, but they have their tails in their mouths, and the reason is, here the Mock Turtle yawned and shut his eyes. Tell her about the reason and all that, he said to the Griffin. The reason is, said the Griffin, that they go with the lobsters to the dance. So when they get thrown out to the sea, they had to fall a long way. So they got their tails fast in their mouths so that they couldn't get them out again. That's all. Thank you, said Alice. It's very interesting. I never knew so much about a whiting before. I can tell you more than that if you like, said the Griffin. Do you know why it's called a whiting? I never thought about it, said Alice. Why? It does have boots and shoes, the Griffin replied very solemnly. Alice was thoroughly puzzled. Does the boots and shoes? She repeated in a wondering tone. Why, what are your shoes done with? said the Griffin. I mean, what makes them so shiny? Alice looked down at them and considered a little before she gave her answer. They're done with blackening, I believe. Boots and shoes under the sea, the Griffin went on in a deep voice, are done with whiting. Now you know. And what are they made of? Asked Alice in a tone of great curiosity. Soles and eels, of course. The Griffin replied rather impatiently. Any shrimp could have told you that. If I'd been the whiting, said Alice, whose thoughts were still running on in the song, I'd have said to the porpoise, keep back, please. We don't want you with us. They were obliged to have him with them, the Mock Turtle said. No wise fish would go anywhere without a porpoise. Wouldn't it, really? Alice said in a great tone of surprise. Of course not, said the Mock Turtle. Mock Turtle. Why, if a fish came to me and told me he was going on a journey, I should say, with what purpose? Don't you mean purpose? Said Alice. I mean what I say, the Mock Turtle replied in an offended tone. And the Gryphon added, Come, let's hear some of your adventures. I could tell you my adventures, beginning from this morning, said Alice a little timidly, but it's no use going back to yesterday, because I was a different person then. Explain all that, said the Mock Turtle. No, the adventures first, said the Gryphon in an impatient tone. Explanations take such a dreadful long time. So Alice began telling them her adventures, from the time when she first saw the white rabbit. She was a little nervous about it, just at first. The two creatures got so close to her, one on each side, and opened their eyes and mouths so very wide. And she gained courage as she went on. Her listeners were perfectly quiet till she got to the part about her repeating, Your old Father William, to the caterpillar, and the words all coming out different, and the Mock Turtle drew a long breath and said, That's very curious. It's all about as curious as it can be, said the Gryphon. It all came out different, the Mock Turtle repeated thoughtfully. I should like to hear her try and repeat something now. Tell her to begin. And he looked at the Gryphon and thought it had some kind of authority over Alice. Stand up and repeat, 'tis the voice of the sluggard, said the Gryphon. How the creatures order one about so, and make one repeat lessons, thought Alice. I might just as well be at school at once. However, she got up and began to repeat it, but her head was so full of the lobster quadrille that she hardly knew what she was saying, and the words came out very queer indeed. "'Tis the voice of the lobster," I heard him declare. "You have baked me too brown, I must sugar my hair. As a duck with his eyelids, so he with his nose trims his belt and his buttons and turns out his toes. When the sands are all dry, he is gay as a lark, and will talk in contemptuous tones of the shark. But when the tide rises and the sharks are around, his voice was as timid and tremulous sound." "That's different from what I used to say when I was a child," said the Gryphon. "Well, I never heard it before," said the Mock Turtle, "but it sounds uncommon nonsense." Alice said nothing. She had sat down with her face in her hands, wondering if anything would ever happen in a natural way again. "I should like to have it explained," said the Mock Turtle. "She can't explain it," said the Gryphon hastily. "Go on with the next verse." "But what about his shoes?" the Mock Turtle persisted. "How could he turn them out with his nose, you know?" "That's the first position in dancing," said Alice, but she was dreadfully puzzled by the whole thing and longed to change the subject. "Go on with the next verse," said the Gryphon repeated. "It begins in, 'I passed by his garden.'" Alice did not dare disobey, but she felt sure it would all come out wrong, but she went on in a trembling voice. "I passed by his garden and mocked with one eye how the owl and the panther were sharing a pie. The panther took pie crust and gravy and meat, while the owl had the dish as its share of the treat. When the pie was all finished, the owl, as a boon, was kindly permitted to pocket the spoon, while the panther received knife and fork with a growl, and concluded the banquet by—" "What is the use of repeating all that stuff?" the Mock Turtle interrupted. "If you don't explain it as you go on. It's by far the most confusing thing that I have ever heard." "Yes, I think you better leave off," said the Gryphon, and Alice was only too glad to do so. "Shall I try another figure of the lobster quadrille?" the Gryphon went on. "Or would you like the Mock Turtle to sing you another song?" "Oh, a song, please, if the Mock Turtle would be so kind." Alice replied so eagerly that the Gryphon said in a rather offended tone, "No accounting for tastes. Sing her Turtle Soup, will you, old fellow?" The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and began in a voice choked with sobs to sing this: "Beautiful soup, so rich and green, waiting in a hot tureen. Who for such dainties would not stoop? Soup for the evening, beautiful soup. Soup for the evening, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, who cares for fish, game, or any other dish? Who would not give all else for two? Pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup." Chorus again, cried the Griffin, and the Mock Turtle had just begun to repeat it when a cry of, "The trial's beginning!" was heard in the distance. "Come on!" cried the Griffin, and taking Alice by the hand, it hurried off, without waiting for the end of the song. "What trial is it?" Alice panted as she ran, but the Griffin only answered, "Come on!" and ran a little faster. All the while more and more faintly carried on the breeze that followed them, the melancholy words, "Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup." And that is the end of chapters 9 and 10 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. That was the Mock Turtle story and the Lobster Quadrille. Like, those are two chapters that a lot of times people don't know. Some people sometimes overlook or don't realize are in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, unless you've read the actual book. Thank you guys so much for joining us again for another reading of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The next time that we meet, we're going to finish up our story by reading our last 2 chapters. Yep, there's only 12 chapters in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And so we're getting so close to the end, guys. So I hope that you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed reading it. Thank you for listening. You guys have a great day. Come by the library and see us. We love seeing you here. Bye.